The young woman my son hired to take care of me had a lovely smile and a way of saying sweetie that I learned, over time, to dread. It took me about 3 weeks to understand she had come to rob me. It took my son 4 months. A notebook full of evidence, and a sheriff's deputy standing in my front hall to understand it too. And by the time he did, the hard part was already finished. Because I had done it myself. Quietly. While everyone in my life was busy treating me like a confused old woman who'd lost her grip. I had not lost my grip. I want that clear from the start. I spent 35 years in a second-grade classroom, and if there is one thing that work burns into you for life, it is the ability to know, the very instant it happens, when someone is lying to your face. The woman who came to take everything I had never once considered that. She saw a 76-year-old widow in a quiet house at the end of a snowy road. She did not see the teacher. That was the mistake that undid her. My name is Marian. I'm 76 years old, and I live in a small brick house in a small town in northern Michigan, where the snow comes off the lake in November and doesn't fully leave until April. And the quiet in January is a thing you can almost hold in your 2 hands. I taught second grade at the same elementary school for 35 years. 35 years. 40 children a year. You can do the arithmetic. It is more than 1,000 children, and I remember a startling number of their names. I taught some of this town's grandparents to read, and then I taught their children, and then I taught their children, until I'd be in line at the grocery and a grey-haired man would say, "Miss Marian, you taught me my letters." And half the time, I could still tell you which desk he'd sat in and whether he'd been a child you could trust. Because that is the thing about second grade that people who haven't done it never understand. A room of 7-year-olds is the most honest courtroom on earth, and also the most full of little liars. And your whole job, all day, every day, is to tell the difference. Who really doesn't feel well, and who just doesn't want to do the spelling? Who actually lost the lunch money, and who is covering for the boy who took it? You learn to read a face the way a farmer reads a sky. You learn that the child protesting hardest is often the one to watch, and that the quiet one in the corner sees everything. There is a particular gift second grade gives a woman, and I'll tell you exactly what it is before we're through, because it turned out to be worth more than the house and the savings and everything in the cigar box put together. But you have to understand the whole of it first, and the whole of it begins, the way these things so often do, with how I came to be alone. My husband was named Hank. He worked 31 years at the auto parts plant out on the county road, second shift mostly, and he came home smelling of machine oil and cold air. And he was the kind of steady that you don't know is holding up your whole life until it's gone. We were married 51 years. He never once raised his voice to me, and he never once let me carry the snow shovel if he was home to do it. And on the cold mornings, he'd start my car and scrape the windshield before I was even up. So I'd come out to a warm seat. It's the small, steady things you miss after. Not the grand ones, the warm seat on a January morning. He had a stroke 3 years ago, on a Tuesday, while he was shoveling that front walk so I wouldn't slip. And he was gone before the ambulance made it up the road. I found him in the snow. I won't say more about that. Some things a person tells once, to God, and then keeps. After Hank, the house got very quiet, and I got very lonely. And I am not too proud to say it, because the loneliness is the door these people come through. They don't break a window. They knock politely, and a lonely woman opens the door herself, glad of the company. I had taught 2 generations of this town's children, and yet I'd find myself going whole days speaking to no one but the cat and the radio. And on the bad evenings, I'd set 2 cups out of habit before I caught myself. Remember that, all of you listening, especially those of you with a mother or an aunt or a neighbor living alone tonight. The loneliness is the unlocked door. It is the thing they smell on you from across a parking lot. We had one son, Greg. He's 51 now, and he lives 3 hours south, near Detroit, where he manages something at a company I've never fully understood. And he married a woman named Renee, who finds me, I think, to be a lot. Greg was a good boy. I taught him to read at this very kitchen table, his little finger under each word. I want to say that plainly, that he was a good boy, because what he did later was not the doing of a bad man. It was the doing of a busy one, a tired one, a man who loved his mother in theory and found her inconvenient in practice. That is a thing that has happened to a great many good sons and a great many good mothers, and it is so ordinary that we hardly call it betrayal. But it nearly cost me everything I had, and so I have had to find the honest word for it. And the honest word is that my son looked away when I needed him to look straight at me. Let me stop here just a moment, because I've been talking a while, and I would love to know who is keeping me company tonight. Wherever you are, whatever town, leave it down below where I can see it. A woman who lives alone in a quiet house learns that a little company, even company she can't see, is no small thing. There now. Where was I? Yes. My Greg, and the help he hired. It started after I had a fall on the ice, that second winter alone. Nothing broke, but I was sore and shaken, and I made the mistake of mentioning it to Greg on the phone. And I heard something in him seize up. The particular panic of a son who lives 3 hours away and cannot be there and feels guilty about it. A week later, he called back and he had a solution. The way men like to have solutions. He'd found a service. They'd send someone to live in, just to help, cook and clean and drive me to the doctor, and be there in case I fell again. He'd pay for it himself. He was so pleased with himself, so relieved, that I didn't have the heart to tell him I didn't want a stranger in Hank's house. So I said yes. For his peace of mind. I said yes. That is the first thing they count on, you know. A mother who will swallow her own wishes to spare her child a worry. The woman they sent was named Crystal. She was 38, with a warm laugh and quick hands and a way of making you feel, those first few weeks, like the most cherished person on earth. She called me sweetie and hun. She made a fuss over me, brushed my hair out the way my own mother used to, sat up with me watching my programs and laughed in all the right places. She told me, more than once, how lucky we were to have found each other, how she just knew the moment she walked in the door that we were going to be something special to one another, the 2 of us. I know now that is a line. I have since learned that it is nearly word for word the line they all use, every one of them. The chosen one feeling, the you and me against the world. Because a lonely woman who has just been made to feel special will forgive that woman almost anything. But I didn't know it then. I only knew that the house was warm again, and that somebody laughed in it, and that I came down to breakfast to a person instead of an empty chair. And I was so grateful for that, so hungry for it after 2 years of the quiet, that for about 3 weeks, I let myself be charmed right down to my shoes. Then the teacher in me woke up. It was a small thing, the first thing, the way it always is. I kept a little cash in a cigar box in the bureau. Hank's old habit. Mad money, he called it. For the church plate and the grandchildren and the man who ploughs the drive. I knew to the dollar what was in it, because I am a woman who is always known to the dollar what is in things. One evening I went to it, and it was $40 short. Now, an old woman is supposed to falter here. That is the whole entire design of it. You're supposed to think, did I spend it? Am I forgetting? Am I finally losing my grip the way everyone keeps hinting I might? But I did not spend it, and I was not forgetting. And I did not lose my grip in a second-grade classroom for 35 years, catching 40 children a year trying to slip one past me. I knew to the dollar what I'd had. So I did not say a single word. I did something far better. I started to watch. The way you watch a quiet classroom when you know a thing has gone missing and you're just waiting, patient as Sunday, to see whose eyes keep drifting to the door. And once I was watching, I saw all of it, the whole quiet machinery of it, laid out as plain as a lesson plan. I saw how Crystal had taken over the mail, gently, helpfully. Oh, let me get that for you, sweetie. The walk's icy, bringing it in and sorting it at the counter, and how somewhere in that sorting, the bank statements simply stopped appearing in the stack I saw. I saw how she'd begun answering the telephone before I could reach it, always first, always cheerful, and how my friend Lois from church, who had called me every Sunday afternoon for 30 years without fail, somehow stopped getting through. And when I asked Lois about it weeks later, she told me Crystal had said I was napping, or poorly, or didn't want to be disturbed, until poor Lois felt she was being a bother and stopped trying. I saw how when Greg called, Crystal would get on the line first, bright as a new dime, telling him what a good day Mama had had, what a good appetite, before she ever handed me the phone, so that by the time I had it in my hand, the whole conversation had already been painted for him, and any worry I tried to raise came out sounding like the fussing of a tired, muddled old woman, because that was the exact frame she had built around me, plank by plank, to stand inside of. I had taught the workshops on this, if you can believe it, bullying and isolation, for the younger teachers. How a bully first cuts the chosen child away from the herd, gets her alone, makes sure no one's looking, and only then goes to work. I had stood at the front of a room with a pointer and explained this very thing to 25-year-olds. And now, I was watching a grown woman run the whole playbook on me, in my own kitchen, with a pot roast going in my own oven, and my own son thanking her for it long distance. I want to be fair, because I always try to be, even now, even about her. I made myself understand Crystal, the way I'd made myself understand 35 years of difficult children, because understanding a thing is how you get out ahead of it. Crystal was not a monster out of a story. She was something more ordinary than that, and more frightening for being ordinary. She was a person who had decided, somewhere down the road of her life, that lonely old women were a resource, like a field you come and harvest in the fall, and that taking from us wasn't really stealing, because we were going to die soon anyway and wouldn't be needing it. I learned later that this was not her first house, not her first widow, not her first cigar box. But even before I knew the history, I knew the type. Because the type sits in the front row of human nature, and it does not change much. She had run the arithmetic on my life and decided I had more than I needed and less time than I thought. The truly chilling thing about people like Crystal is not that they think they're evil. It's how reasonable it all sounds to them. How kind, even, in their own telling. She believed, I am fairly sure, that she was a good person having a run of hard luck. They mostly do. Then the thefts grew. The way every expert will tell you, they always grow once the thief feels safe and unwatched. The missing 20s from the cigar box became a missing 50. Then one morning, my mother's cameo brooch was gone out of the jewelry box. The brooch my mother wore to my wedding, and her mother wore before her. And when I mentioned it, mild as warm milk, just wondering aloud where it might have got to, Crystal looked me dead in the eye and said, "Maybe I'd misplaced it, sweetie. My memory just wasn't what it used to be, was it?" My memory was perfectly fine. My memory is fine right now, telling you this. But there it was again, laid down soft as a quilt over the whole thing. The suggestion that the problem was my failing mind and not her busy hands. And here is the part that broke my heart worse than the brooch, worse than every dollar. I called Greg. I waited until Crystal had gone out to the store, and I shut the kitchen door, and I called my son. And I told it to him, careful and calm and in order, the way I'd written up an incident for the principal 100 times. Money missing, dated. The brooch gone. The phone calls vanishing one by one. And my son, my Greg, the boy I taught to read at this table, let out the long, tired sigh I'd heard him use on his own children when they were being difficult, and he said, "Mom, come on, now. Crystal is a godsend. Renee and I finally sleep through the night not worrying about you. I honestly think you're just lonely up there, and maybe a little confused, and you've gone looking for somebody to pin it on. Please, don't run her off over a brooch you probably set down somewhere." A little confused. My own son reached out across 300 miles and handed me that exact word. The precise word the thief in my house had been carefully planting in me for weeks. And he handed it to me gently, like it was a gift, like it was love. That was the night I stopped being sad about all of it and started being a teacher about it. Because here is the gift that 35 years of second grade gives you. The thing I told you I'd come to. It is not that you can tell when someone is lying, though you can. It is that you learn to be patient about it. A good teacher who knows a child is lying does not pounce. You wait. You gather. You let the child believe they've gotten away with it, right up until the day you lay it all out, dated and documented, so plainly that there is nothing left to argue. I was not going to confront Crystal and be told I was confused. I was not going to beg Greg to believe me. I was going to build a case so complete that no one would be able to call me anything but right. So I did, quietly, the way I'd graded papers for 35 years. Late at night, when the house was asleep and Crystal was snoring down the hall. I had a red gradebook still, an old cloth-bound one from my last year of teaching, and I started keeping the record in it because no one on this earth ever thinks to look in an old teacher's gradebook. Every missing dollar with the date and the amount in my own neat hand, the same hand that had written 10,000 report cards. Every disappeared phone call, every gentle little lie quoted word for word with the date beside it. I started counting the cash in the cigar box every single night before bed and writing down the number so that the pattern would build itself across the page. Undeniable, the way a struggling reader's progress builds across a chart until even the doubting parent has to see it. A single missing $40 is a confused old woman. 11 dated entries in a steady hand is a case. And I did one thing more, the thing that turned out to matter most of all. The next time my grandson Sam called, my Sam, 20 years old and away at the university, the one soul in my whole family that Crystal had never managed to fully wall off, because young people text instead of telephone, and a text is a great deal harder to intercept than a Sunday phone call. I told him I needed his help with a little project for the church newsletter. I chose those words on purpose. Dull words, church words, the kind Crystal's ears would slide right off of. Sam is a sharp boy. He heard the thing underneath the words, and the next time he came home for a weekend, while Crystal believed he was just a grandson visiting his grandmother, that boy quietly tucked a small camera into the bookshelf, pointed square at the bureau and the cigar box, and showed me how it saved everything to a little account that only he and I could open. He hugged me at the door and whispered, "Get her, Grandma." 20 years old. Then I marked the bills, 5 $20 bills, and on each one I put a tiny pencil dot in the corner of the collar, right on Andrew Jackson, where not a living soul would notice it unless they already knew to look. I laid them in the cigar box like bait in a trap, which is exactly what they were. And then I did the hardest thing of all, the thing 35 years had trained me for. I waited. I let her feel safe. I played, every single day, the part she had written for me. The grateful, fading, slightly muddled old woman who was just so lucky to have her. After 35 years of school Christmas pageants and parent conferences where I had to smile at people I'd have liked to shake, I will tell you plainly, it was the finest performance of my life. But I have to tell you about the week it nearly all came apart. Because it nearly did. And not the way you'd think. Crystal got ambitious. Feeling safe, feeling that I was thoroughly under her thumb and my son thoroughly on her side, she decided to go for the whole thing. She told me, one evening, all warmth, that she'd been so worried about me, and that she thought it would be smart, just in case, to have some papers drawn up so she could help me handle things if I ever got really poorly. She had a man coming Thursday, she said, a notary, a friend of hers, just a precaution, sweetie. And I understood exactly what those papers would be. Power of attorney, her name on my accounts, maybe a new will. The whole field harvested at once. And here is the near disaster. And it is the part that ought to frighten every single one of you who has an aging parent. So listen close. I called Greg one more time to warn him, because he was still my son, and I still believed a son should be given the chance to do right. I said, plain as I could, your mother is about to be pressured into signing away everything she owns. There is a man coming Thursday. Please. And Greg, tired, stretched thin, exasperated with the mother who would not stop causing him worry, said the words that very nearly ended me. He said, "Mom, I'll be honest with you. If you keep accusing Crystal of these things, I'm going to start to wonder whether you really can take care of yourself anymore. Maybe it's time we sat down and talked about somewhere you'd be safer." Do you hear what almost happened in that sentence? Do you hear it? My fight to keep from being robbed was about to be turned into the very proof that I couldn't be trusted with my own life. The thief, working from inside my house, and my own exhausted son working from 3 hours away, without ever once meaning to be on the same side, had nearly closed the last door on me together. One of them wanted me declared confused so she could take my money. The other was ready to believe I was confused so he wouldn't have to drive up and look. And between the two of them, an honest woman telling the plain truth was about to be filed away as a problem to be managed. I hung up the telephone. I sat in Hank's recliner in the dark for a long while, with the snow ticking against the window. And somewhere in that dark, I made my decision, and it was a teacher's decision. I would not call my son a third time. I would not stand in my own kitchen and beg the people who were supposed to love me to please consider believing me. I was done asking permission to be believed. I would simply finish the case, completely, and then I would let the evidence speak. Because evidence, unlike a 76-year-old widow, can never be sighed at and called confused. I did not wait for Thursday's notary. On Wednesday morning, while Crystal ran her errands, I made 2 telephone calls. The first was to the bank, to the manager I'd known for 20 years, who pulled the records and went very quiet when he saw the withdrawals. The new card I never asked for, the pattern as plain as a child's confession. The second call was to Adult Protective Services, the county office, a number I'd had to look up because Crystal had thrown away my address book, but a teacher knows how to find a number. A kind, sharp woman there listened to every dated line of my red grade book, and then she said the words I had been waiting 4 months to hear from somebody. She said, "Ma'am, I believe you, and what you're describing is a crime." It moved fast after that, faster than I expected. The way things do once the right people finally believe you. The investigator came out the next day, a calm woman with kind eyes who'd plainly seen 100 crystals. And she sat at my kitchen table and read my red grade book line by dated line. And she looked at the bank manager's records. And she watched Sam's little camera catch Crystal's hand going into that cigar box. Plain as daylight. 3 separate times on 3 separate evenings. She closed the grade book gently when she was done, and she said, "Ma'am, in 20 years, I have rarely seen a victim document a case this well. Most folks come to me with a feeling. You've brought me a conviction." I told her I'd had a great deal of practice keeping records on people who thought they could fool me. And on Thursday, the very morning the notary was supposed to come and finish me off for good, there was indeed a man at my door at 10 o'clock. It just was not the notary. It was a sheriff's deputy with the investigator beside him, and they had a warrant in hand. And when they searched the room where Crystal slept, they found my 5 marked 20s, every one with its little pencil dot tucked in Jackson's collar. And they found my mother's cameo brooch wrapped up in a sock at the bottom of her duffel bag. And they found one thing more, the thing that turned my stomach and steadied my spine both at once. A list, a handwritten list of 3 other women's names in 3 other counties, with their addresses and little notes beside them. I had not been Crystal's first field. I would not have been her last. But I was, and I will say this with no shame at all. I was the one who finally got her stopped. She did not go quietly. All the sweetie and the Hun curdled in about 4 seconds into something far uglier. A great deal of shouting about everything she'd done for me. The cooking, the driving, how this was the thanks she got, how I was a crazy old woman who dreamed it all up. I stood in my own front hall, the hall where Hank's winter coat still hung on its hook because I had never been able to take it down. And I let her say every word of it. And when she ran out of words, I said the only thing I said to her in the whole of it. I said, "I taught 2nd grade for 35 years, dear. I have been lied to by experts, by professionals, by children far cleverer than you. You were never even close." And the deputy walked her out my front door and into the snow. And I shut the door behind her. And I stood there a moment in the sudden quiet, And then I went and put the kettle on, because I'd earned a cup of tea. Now I have to tell you about Greg, because the hardest reckoning in this whole story was never with the stranger. The stranger was easy. The stranger I saw coming from across the room. The hard one was my son. He drove up that same night, 3 hours in the dark, through the lake-effect snow that closes that road half the winter, after the investigator telephoned him and told him, in plain county language, exactly what his mother had quietly accomplished while he was busy not believing her. And he came into my kitchen, 51 years old, snow melting off his good coat onto my floor. And he did not have one single word ready. He just stood there. And then my big grown son put his face into his hands, the same hands I'd taught to tie their shoes at this very table. And he cried the way he hadn't cried since he was a small boy. And what he finally got out was, "Mom, you told me. You told me and I called you confused. I almost let her. I almost signed you over to her. I almost put you somewhere." And he couldn't finish the rest of it, because there wasn't any rest of it. That was the whole of the wound, laid open. I could have been cruel. The Lord knows I had earned myself a little cruelty, kept in reserve, ready to spend. But cruelty is a poor crop. It feeds you once and leaves the ground worse than it found it. And I have never in my long life found it worth the planting. So I did with my son what I did with every child who ever finally, truly understood the wrong he'd done. I told him the truth, kindly, and then I let it sit on him with its own full weight. Because a truth you rush to comfort somebody out of is a lesson half taught. I took his face in my hands and I said, "Gregory, look at me. I never once needed you to fix me. I have never in my life needed fixing. What I needed, the only thing I needed, was for you to believe me. When a person who has run her own life for 76 years tells you something is wrong in it, the very least you owe her, before the doctors and the homes and the solutions, is to believe she might know her own life better than you do. You handed me to a stranger because it was easier than driving up this road. And then, when I called you for help, you decided your mother was the problem to be solved. I forgive you, son. I do, fully. But you are going to have to sit a good long while with how close that came." And he has. He sits with it still. He calls me every single evening now, just past 6, and I've come to understand it isn't guilt that dials the phone anymore. It's that he remembered, a little late, that he'd always wanted to. I'm 76 years old, and I still live in Hank's brick house at the end of the snowy road, and I am nobody's field to harvest. I got my mother's brooch back, and it sits in the box on the bureau where it belongs. I got most of my money back, in time, and Crystal got 2 years behind bars and a record that will trip every alarm in every agency the next time she tries to talk her way through a lonely woman's front door. My friend Lois calls again on Sundays, regular as church bells. And I did one last thing, because a teacher cannot help but make a lesson out of a hard year. It's a sickness with us. I started a thing down at the church we call the Tuesday Tree. It's a list, kept current, of every widow and widower and shut-in for miles around. And every Tuesday, without fail, somebody calls every name on that list. Not for any reason, just to talk. Just so that no lonely soul in this whole county is ever again sitting alone behind an unlocked door, waiting to be grateful for the wrong kind of company. We have caught 2 more of them since we started, 2 more sweet-talking crystals, and we caught them for the simplest reason in the world. People were checking on each other, and a thief cannot work a field that the neighbors are watching. The loneliness had been the open door. It turns out, plain, ordinary company is the lock. People think the most dangerous thing for an old woman living alone is a stranger. And a stranger nearly did take everything I had. But here is the truer thing, and I learned it the hard way. So let me hand it to you for free. The most dangerous thing is not being believed. A predator can only rob you of your money. It takes the people who love you looking the other way, calling you confused, too busy to drive 3 hours, to rob you of the ground to stand on while you fight. So if there is an old person in your life trying to tell you something is wrong, I am asking you, from my own front hall in the snow, do not sigh. Do not say they're confused. Drive the 3 hours. Believe them first and check the facts second. It is the cheapest thing in the world to give somebody, and it is worth more than everything in the cigar box. If this story found you tonight, stay a while, and I'll have another for you soon. And tell me down below, has somebody ever refused to believe you when you knew you were right? And where in this world are you keeping me company from tonight? I read every single one. Take care of yourself, and check on the people you love.